Thank you very much, Michael, and indeed a very good morning to you. A special edition of the newsroom today from the Serena Hotel, where we're just a few minutes away from the launch of a report by the Committee to Protect Journalists. CPJ today is launching a report dubbed Broken Promises and how Kenya is failing to uphold its commitment to a free press. So why not come in and be part of the conversation today? That's what the newsroom chose to be here, and will indeed be live for the entire event starting off at around 9 a.m. But before that, we want to get into a discussion around some of the issues raised in this report, and we welcome your viewers to be part of our discussion this morning. Go ahead and tweet Sophia Wanuna. We'll be looking at what you have to say. I want to introduce my panelists to you, and of course today we'll also be changing midway so that we also get an idea, an indication of what the conveners of this particular meeting and also those that put together this report, what led them to do it, the kind of research and work that went into it as well. So that will be part of the conversation this morning. But first up is Derek Latif, who is an editor, online editor at the Capital FM. Also with us is the one and only Dr. Nancy Booker. She's the head of the multimedia the journalism department of the Multimedia University, and Patrick Gadara, who's a communications consultant. Ladies, gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning.
You look very cold.
It's
so
July weather, man.
July weather.
Yeah.
It's good to see you all, and I forwarded the report to you, so I imagine you had an opportunity to have a look. Your thoughts on it, Latif, at a time like this, and this report coming out, you have those from government saying the media is now enjoying really good space, freedom. However, on the other side, you have various practitioners in the industry coming out to say they've never seen such laws that, you know, clamp down on that space or even violence meted against journalists.
I'm going to say, I look at the report and I say, I think we balance it both ways. The report highlights issues where, you know, there are issues that we need to address as the media fraternity. For example, talking about the laws, the controversial laws that have been passed and that have been pushed through Parliament until the media fraternity actually went to court and tried to block them. However, and also, well, there are those other instances where we know that journalists have faced difficulties in doing their work. However, I'd also like to say that it's not all doom and gloom. I'm here to say, to actually say that it's not all doom and gloom. There are very many challenges, yes, a couple of challenges, yes, but there are also very many gains as well in terms of entrenchment of media as the fourth estate and practice of journalism in this country.
Yes. Do you share the same thoughts, Nancy?
First of all, I must commend the Committee for the Protection of Journalists for the report. I think it's a consolidated piece because we've been talking about these cases on a one-off basis, and so by reading the report you have a general view of what the overall picture looks like, and it then documents various cases of where journalists have been mishandled or mistreated, injured in the line of duty, and of course the interferences that come with that. I think for me the greatest challenge is, when I read the report, it paints a very bleak picture of Kenyan media, and I was a bit unsettled with that because I believe that in as much as this is going on, that there have also been lots of gains within media in this particular country. And my other concern was with the recommendations that the report suggests, because after you read it and you ask yourself the so what question, I kind of feel that the recommendations that are given are a little bit abstract and become very difficult to implement. And I'm happy that we'll have a forum with these people, hopefully in the course of the day, to just interrogate some of the issues that they're highlighting, because when you present such a report, I think some of the recommendations that you give really need to be spot on, so that if somebody looks at that report and would want to implement them, then how do they go about doing that? So I was looking, I think I hoped for a more objective report in terms of looking at some of the gains. True, we appreciate that there have been lots of challenges, and we have seen a lot of attack on journalists over the recent past, but it doesn't spell all doom for the practice of journalism in this country.
So they're called the Committee to Protect Journalists. Should they be talking about gains, or should they just say, wow, they're protecting, and this is what they're protecting the journalists from?
They should also be protecting gains.
Well, I think it's a bit unfair to expect that the report will give an overall snapshot of the media landscape. I think it is. I think the purpose of it is to really highlight lots of, what the challenges are, and in that sense it will be a bit skewed towards
challenges.
Yeah, but that said, and having gone, I've just perused the report. I haven't really gone through it in any detail. But one of the things I feel is missing in there is the challenges that the media itself imposes on itself. I think there's quite a lot of talk of, and that is all fine and good, about the pressures they get from government, from corporations, and stuff. But the issue of self-censorship within the press itself, and how the media itself has conducted itself in doing its work.
I think that has been highlighted, and they talked about the fact that even the media owners come in with their interest, and gave the example of what happened when the court leader returned from the U.S. and the decision.
I saw a bit of that, but I thought, for me, the real seminal case would have been the fight over digital migration, where the media was outright distorting news to keep it on.
And now they will be protecting the journalists.
So it's important to also look at how media utilizes the little freedom it has. But that said, it's important, I think, for people to recognize that the space within which the media has to operate has been shrinking. And very much has been a deliberate ploy by government to essentially reduce that. And we have seen this not just in terms of legislation, but also in the way that it conducts itself towards, in the references that people like the president and stuff make towards the media. That space has been diminishing. It's creating a very sort of adversarial and hostile environment, for journalists to work.
I was sure that Gadara was going to come and say that.
You'd have said it for him.
As soon as there was a report coming on, I just knew that Gadara was going to come and say that. And what I'd like to know from Gadara is, when you say that the space is shrinking, it's shrinking over what period of time?
Well, I think...
Are you saying it's shrinking from the 60s to the 70s?
Well, no, actually, I think by the time we hit 2002, 2004, it was quite free. And I think one of the big misconceptions that have been there, the government brought media freedom. Kibaki gave us media freedom. He did it. He was a beneficiary of freedom that people had fought for. And actually, once he got in, he started clamping down on it. And the same thing, Uhuru has been a beneficiary of this. But once they are in power, as all governments try to do, they start reducing that space. And it's up to us to stand up to them. If we don't push back, that space will keep being shrunk.
I think what we have seen, I think when we talk about shrinking space, we need to look at it in the context of the space that has been created. And I think that space has been widened so much so that you have more players, and as a result of that, then you're likely to see a lot more of that because you have more players in the market.
And you'll find reports that will come out, exposés. These are things that a while back you could not do in the industry. Now you can, and you do all these reports and analysis. Yes, there'll be a few comments here and there, even made towards the media, but at least you're able and you're operating in a space that you can do this. And we'll continue this conversation, especially with the people who wrote this particular report from the Committee to Protect Journalists. But I want us to veer off subject for just a little while and talk about other stories we've been covering for about 10 minutes or so. And with the launch of second channel, of course. There are those who are watching us this morning from KTN News. In case you haven't tuned in, you want to check it out, KTN News is on channel 274 on DSTV, and of course the rest are scrolling down on your screen. You can have a look at that channel. So Gadara, you need to say something a little bit positive this time around.
I think, and I've held for a long time, that Kenya needs a 24-hour, at least a regular news channel, a dedicated news channel. And I think the fact that this has been launched in itself is to be praised. I'm quite happy that it's on now. I think once it's run for a while, then we'll be able to judge and gauge how well it's doing in terms of covering the news. I mean,
you'll start bashing after a while.
Well, not really bashing, and this is the
to be objective.
Yeah. About bashing the press, you know, but we need to hold the press to a standard, you know, and it needs to achieve that standard, because the practice of journalism isn't just for the journalists, you know, isn't just something for the media houses, you know, it affects all of us. Why Kenyans in their hundreds and their thousands went to the street to fight for this freedom, so that you guys could sit here and say what you do, you know. You've got a public to uphold, and in as far as you fall short of that, then we shouldn't be shy about pointing it out.
Yeah, Nancy.
First of all, I think congratulations to Standard Group for this new channel, and it just goes on to show the opening up of space, you know, where we have a variety of content now, and I'm very excited about a 24-hour news channel. I sat down to watch the countdown because I wanted to see, you know, what the channel has, and I'm very excited about it. I think for me then, going forward is wanting to see real news stories, and you know, one of the challenges that an all-news station would face in a context like this is that one of the things that one of the challenges would be attracting advertisers. I mean, advertisers don't put their money in all news stations, and you know, for me, you know, seeing the kind of stories that come out of this particular channel will point towards the kind of commitment that the media, you know, group has towards supporting news coverage by investing, you know, because if you have an all-news station, then you know, you're going much more than just the everyday reporting. You're going into feature stories, you're going into investigative reporting, and you know, the quality of stories that we are likely to see on this particular channel should then speak of the commitment of media houses, and particularly in this case the Standard Group, in supporting journalism, because they will have to make a huge investment to keep that station relevant. And then of course I'm also hoping to see more regional stories, because I think the promise is that this is going to be a regional you know, station, so I would like to see more regional stories going forward. But I think so far so good. Yeah.
Eric,
let me take this space. It's mine now, so I'm going to use it well. And the first thing I want to say is well, it's a very good thing that KTN News has launched, but let's also say clearly, it's not the first 24-hour news station.
Yeah, and
in 2006, I sat down with Rose Kimolo and we designed a station that was going to be Kenyan and news, and we launched it in 2007. And K24 was the first 24-hour news station. And even then, the kind of conversations that were happening, you know, outside the station, in the other stations, is the same kind of conversation that's happening now. A lot of pessimism and thinking, oh, how are they going to sustain it? And I keep just looking at it, but I'm not even commenting, because I know it can be sustained, and it's very much possible. The thing about news is we have got into this space where we always think that news is when we say you have Raila as a first story, or Uhuru as a first story, or Ruto as a first story, and that's not necessarily it. If we have to run news, I mean, we have a lot of information we can talk about. If we are talking about region, we can talk about Rwanda, and if it's Rwanda, it's not necessarily about Kagame. It's a lot of stuff that's happening in Rwanda. We have, for example, the Chimwada report that's coming on KTN News. It's going to be talking about other things that are happening, and there's a lot of information, a lot of content that can sustain this station.
Yeah, but one thing I would add is, I mean, there's been lots of talkers we've had here of the developing news, you know, and I'm hoping that as this goes forward, we'll have the time for doing that will shrink, because you can have news bulletins, if it's on the hour, that keep including more information, more context and stuff. It's not all predicated on a 20-second or 2-minute slot on the 9 o'clock news. You can do it all across the day. And this also means that, I mean, it's going to change quite a lot even how our politics is run, because then suddenly it's not just waiting for 9 o'clock or 7 o'clock, but throughout the day we can cultivate audiences and we can be informing people, you know, about what's going on in the day.
Actually, I'd like to remind people, I'd like to remind people about when Sky was starting, and we used to sit down in the newsroom and watch Sky News, and you know, they used to have a 15-minute bulletin. And that 15-minute bulletin would end, then they run weather bumper for like 2 minutes, and you're like, really, what are these guys doing? But you know what they're doing is that they're trying to refresh that bulletin. And the next bulletin starts, the first story has actually a different slant to it, it has an intro. So it kept increasing like that. And if you watch Sky News now, they have mastered that modular kind of news, because it's modular news. You have a story that runs now, the next intro and the next hour, it's changing, it's developing, it's you're adding something, you're removing something. We'll get used to it, it becomes a show. So the whole thing is actually a show. If you watch CNN, they have shows now. We have Connecting the World with Becky Anderson.
The world right now.
It's the same story that has actually been done.
If you look at all the bulletins, it's pretty much the same stuff, but
different angles.
So that, I mean, you can have much more context built into storage, which makes them much more informative. You know, than the sort of one-sided thing we have now.
And I think for me, having watched, you know, the channel this last couple of days, is the opportunity that it gives to a number of stories that would not have made headlines. You know, stories about, you know, people in the counties. You know, some of those stories that would not have seen the light of day, or in a 9 o'clock bulletin, for example. And I think for me that's a huge plus, that we get to be connected, you know, to a number of stories that would ordinarily have been considered of insignificant people or not prominent people, and giving these stories life and you know, letting us know about this. And I think for me, you know, the launch of this station, then I don't know what Clay will be saying after this, because then we're not going to say we are chasing the next big thing. You know,
it's coming.
You know, that we now have no excuse to say, you know, we don't have a platform to do that, and we're always chasing the next big thing. That we have a whole 24 hours here to be able to follow, stories.
You know, the other opportunity as well, Nancy, is at the university, Multimedia University now has a slot. I mean, all your students now, if you come up with a good story, and like you kept saying, come up with a good story, you can actually now come to KTN News. They have 24 hours.
A lot of space.
Your stories.
On that front, one of the things I'd really like to see, and just tying it to what Nancy said, is more news coming out of the counties. You know, and I think if we have crews not necessarily employed by KTN, by even independent small news stations that focus on what's happening in the counties, and what space on a national platform to put that up. You know, but just one thing I'd like to say also is, we need to, while this is fine having a big national 24-hour news thing, we really shouldn't lose the picture of having county-based news stations that are broadcast to counties, so that this national conversation doesn't always overwhelm what's happening at the counties. That counties can get together and hold their own officials to account, get stories about them being big national stuff.
And just to add on, I think we need to protect this 24-hour news station, so that it's devoid of, you know, the advertising interests, you know, and all the other interests. I think we really need to stick to the reason why this station was formed in the first place. We want to see it. We want to see the success story.
But can you separate the advertising? It is to, you know, survive and sustain. So I guess it's the influence in terms of the stories that are being done. To find that balance, so that you're still doing your work professionally, but hey, the money's gotta come.
Money has got to come, and I think Standard Group has many other forums in which they can do that.
Can source money from where?
Because we won't soon, I mean, you spoke of K24, which is supposed to be, but you switch on now, there's Niger movie. Hoping this won't happen.
And protecting it means that you have the kind of content that makes people want to tune into that particular station.
It has to be fresh.
It has to be fresh, objective. It has to be objective. And you know, not use it, not, you know, despair in a couple of years and now, you know, look for other things because it's expensive to sustain.
All right.
Yeah.
And indeed, KTN News is where you get the whole story. So we hope you'll be watching, and I'm sure Gadara will be keeping us on our toes to ensure we don't lose focus on that. I want to take a short break in about 3 minutes, but before we go, let's also talk about corruption, because the second half of the show will focus on pretty much this report and journalists in general and the media in the country. But corruption is still a story that's dominating news headlines in the country, and now we have allegations of land grabbing by an opposition leader, and there was a rejoinder yesterday. And is the media now rising above the political noise and narrative and covering the issues, Gadara?
I don't think it is. I mean, on the new accusations against Kalonzo and stuff, again, they come from politicians, you know. And if, I mean, Gerenji and Sakaja are already calling for title deeds to be revoked, you know, stuff, and I assume prosecutions as well. But my point is, again, we need to have an independent, the media to act as an independent arbiter of the truthfulness of these accusations, you know, and to give context to them, you know, not just to repeat what Sakaja said, you know. And I think in as much as the media, our media has been very simply a reflection, you know, of what politicians say, and doesn't really interrogate it, you know. I think there it really fails us.
I think what we've seen the last couple of days has more or less been a ping-pong, you know, kind of scenario, and you know, I just hope that media can rise above that and not play into this ping-pong game and go in depth and, you know, and unearth some of this, because the challenge then that we face is that we are then playing into the you know, the tunes of the politicians and losing focus of what the real issues are. And that has been the challenge, separating the politics, you know, from issues of corruption, and you know, covering them a lot more in depth, rather than looking at it from, you know, the political alignment that these stories then or these accusations are taken.
Don't you get a sense, Eric, that a lot of some of the coverage you see is out of laziness on our part as journalists, that we want to run with what the politicians have said? We don't want to go investigate, we don't want to go look at the facts and what really is at the heart of it. We simply want to go with this MP or this whoever said this and the other, and that becomes a story, and then wait for the reaction, and that story keeps going.
Maybe the question should be, what exactly do we want to do? Probably what we actually want to do is to run the sensationalism. Is to run the drama. It's not really, we're not really interested in informing or even unearthing the corruption. If the drama is what we are interested in, that's what we're going to give you. I'm not saying that's what it is, but sometimes it's actually unfortunate. Sometimes when you actually sit there and you're thinking, really, so because Ngilu has now aligned with Kalonzo, and Kalonzo has come to court, let's look for something to pin on this too, and someone comes up with something. It's not a new story. The Yatta land issue has been there for long. I mean, it's not new. So someone just comes and brings it up. And the media is just the
but this, you know, one thing I find curious is, I mean, as you say, it's not a new story, but it is presented as if it is new. It is
well, the newness of this story, why it came back, is the lawyer that went to court asking why the matter was dragging in as far as the ACC investigations of him. That is why it was coming.
But I'm saying,
it was the Standard that wrote about it.
But you know, it was brought up now.
This
lawyer just go to court because really the lawyer was
from the goodness of his heart.
Politics, and it's just the field. We as the media are the field, and these guys are just playing the ball. And what are we doing there? Well, goalpost this side, goalpost the other side, who's scoring? And that's it. And it's the showbiz. We are actually just enjoying a nice piece of drama.
And elsewhere, is this how we see these kind of stories covered, or are we a peculiar media coverage in terms of corruption?
Well, in some instances, yes, we see them taking the same kind of direction. But I guess I think, you know, as audiences, we tend to consume much more politics. You know, it seems to sell, and so I guess you, as media, then you are more or less inclined to want to cover the political side of this stories.
Yeah.
Because if the headline doesn't have a political connotation in as much as you're covering corruption, then the paper will not sell. You know, and I guess then part of
and so the people also are part of the problem.
Yes, but you know,
not really.
Is that what they want?
Human nature.
Are you not giving them what they want? Public.
Again, I really don't agree that it is.
Then why is it selling? And when you stick to the facts,
sell.
it doesn't
I mean,
sell.
sensationalism does sell, to be honest. But I think in our case, it's really in the absence of anything else being offered, you know. And you know, and this is my problem: is we create this expectation, you know, by our reporting, by the way we do the news, we create the expectation that this is how news will be covered, you know, and then we blame the audience for expecting. You know.
That's one way of looking at it. Gather, you must be open to the other side, Eric, that perhaps we have tried to give this other side which has been, you know, put aside.
I'd like to see where.
Finally, before we go on break.
That could be a perhaps. But I think, let's just be honest. The honesty here is that we are running some of these things when they have a political connotation, we go with the sensationalism. All right? Maybe covered in the report, actually, part of the report, in terms of even how the media is set up, how a certain media house is set up. It's set up with political interest at heart.
Yeah.
Actually, the vein is political interest. So when it plays politics, it's also advancing the interest of, you know, the board of directors in some way, or the policy of the media house in some way. It's doing all that.
Okay.
So look at, we're saying it's not unique. Look at France. France, when they have a man who's the head of the World Bank, or is it IMF, who's going to be running for president, hit him hard with some scandal. The current president, he has a girlfriend, he used to be married, he has a girlfriend, he's actually caught walking. Becomes the mainstream media news that the president was caught walking from his place to some
All right. So it happens.
It happens.
So a lot
nobody
of
ever goes deep to check.
Yeah.
All right, did Dominic Strauss-Kahn actually molest this woman in the hotel room? Follow up. We are done with Dominic Strauss-Kahn. He's not running.
Then you move on.
Let's move on.
Definitely a lot of interest that are always, you know, pulling from one side to the other when it comes to coverage and what makes it to the news. We're glad you're watching Morning Express today. We are coming to you live from the Serena Hotel, this special edition of the Newsroom. More so because the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, is today launching a report dubbed Broken Promises. They say how Kenya is failing to uphold its commitment to a free press. And that's what we want to focus on for the next half hour of this show. So we take a short break. When we return, we'll have other panelists as well joining us in order to take this discussion forward. Stay with us. It's failing to uphold its commitment to a free press, and that is why we're here for the newsroom this morning. We've bumped off Gadara a little bit. He'll be back later on as we have discussions on this particular subject. But joining us also on set this morning is Victor Bwire. He's the Deputy CEO at the Media Council of Kenya. He's on my extreme left. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Pleasure.
And also Tom Rhodes, who is the East Africa representative for the Committee to Protect Journalists. We thank you both for being here with us, and of course Nancy Buka and Eric Latif, who were with us before. I'll start with you, Tom, because earlier on when I put to my panelists what they thought of this particular report, there was criticism on the fact that there was a little bit of too much negativity, that, you know, gains not being recognized. It paints a bleak picture of the media industry. Do you get that sense of, for you, this perhaps does not even tell the full picture or story?
I mean, that's a fair criticism, you know, but again, that's not the point of the report. The report isn't there to show the gains of the press, but to show the deficiencies, to try to find ways to correct them. I mean, but that is fair criticism. I think there could have been more positive mixed in with the negative. Yeah.
All right. So how long did it take to put this together? And, you know, in terms of resources, you've quoted a number of journalists. Do you feel you've done justice to the issues of the media in the country?
I feel that we did a good overview of some of the problems and challenges that the Kenya press face today. You know, in the past when I've seen sort of media critiques, national media critiques, they may focus on one or two issues, say the legal issues, or say the physical attacks, etc. But it's not all encompassed in one document, and that kind of was the intention of this.
Okay. Yeah. Victor, your thoughts on the report?
I read the report and I thought it was very conservative, and I made a comment to them. They were very fair in their assessment of the things, because I was looking at the cases and the approach they gave, and I think they left out quite a number of issues and cases that currently face the press in Kenya. I'm thinking, and again, like Tom says, the purpose was to iron out the deficiencies. So while they had a page on the positives, and there are quite a lot that is happening positively in the industry, yes, but there are quite a number of things that need to be looked at. Obviously, many times such reports have a tick a box approach, because they look at the legal. Most of these reports look at the legal environment, and they just tick. And legally, Kenya is not doing well in terms of, if you look at the legal environment in which the media is operating. It might be doing well, but we have quite a number of laws. So when they are ticking their box and they find quite a number of laws that are inconsistent, much as some of them are not applied, like the Books and Newspaper Act, for example, they are still in our statute books. The KBC Act, for example, they are still there, which says that you can't listen to a radio station without a permit. Those things are still there. But on the bigger picture, we have 100 and something FM stations. We have 40 something TV stations. But what happens if somebody woke up one day and wanted to enforce the KBC Act or the Books and Newspaper Act? So that's why we are saying that, yes. But to me, I found it was a bit conservative, and I can understand. From where they are coming from.
Nancy, in terms of the recommendations, which I want us to look at some of them, you had some concerns. Share them with us.
I think I read the report, and as I said, I commended them, for that. But I think what I wanted to see was situating, this within a context of the kind of media environment that we're operating in today, and appreciating the gains that we have made. Then talk about the challenges of the broken promises. And I think as I read the recommendations, because after reading it, I think the most important question for me is, so what? Going forward, what should we do so that we ensure that we protect journalists, and we also protect the profession. And I got the impression that the recommendations were a little bit abstract, that they were not detailed. And so if I take this and I want to put, for example, Media Council to task, because I think there are certain issues or recommendations that point towards what government should do, what Media Council should do, then what will I be holding them accountable to? And I guess that for me was a challenge.
Do you share the same, Eric, before I bring it back to Tom for a response?
Yes, in a way, but I also think in terms of the recommendations, I think the recommendations are a bit, just open. They're not quite specific. For example, when you say the Media Council has like 3 recommendations, among them set up a dedicated system to document and support. It's a fair challenge to you, and I think that's among the things that should not even be appearing in this report. That should be an obvious thing. Things that Media Council and even the other associations of journalists should do. I think most of the things that we are capturing, that are captured in this report, are things that, like we were saying, there are very many laws out there that, could one day someone could wake up and just decide to use a certain kipengele cha sheria and just bring us down. But they're there and they're silent, and yet what the rest of us are doing is, instead of going to make sure that at this point when it's not in use, we make sure that it's actually removed, we're silent. And what do? We launch such a report, we look at the main issues, and then we forget the other underlying factors that could be used. There's always going to be a law in any government, name me any government that does not have a law that is actually seeking at curtailing the freedom of the media. Every government is actually seeking to minimize the amount of information that it has to release to its people, and that's the nature of government. And the nature of media is to try and actually reach out into getting all that information and spreading that information. So I think it's for the players in the industry to come together and see how do we actually approach this. I very much like what is happening right now. For example, We have a very robust Editors Guild under the leadership of the previous chairman, Macharia Gaido, and now with Linus Kaikai. And the Editors Guild, I know now for a fact that they have meetings almost on a weekly basis. And what are they doing? It's just backroom advocacy. Just trying to reach out and explain this position and try and, you know, steer conversations towards things that will be of benefit to the industry, and the profession.
So I think for me, sorry, maybe just before we get to Tom, like one of the recommendations to the Media Council about setting up a proper system of, you know, documenting, you know, some of the, I thought they actually do that.
That's already there. That's why.
You know, so the question is, I guess, other than just having, you know, setting up a documentation center and meeting with the what happens beyond that? You know, and maybe that's a question that Victor can help.
So, Tom, you've had what they've had to say on the recommendations, but also explain to us what is it you hope to achieve with this particular report. So, you put all of this together. What is it you hope to achieve?
We're trying to push on different levels. I mean, look, officially the launch is supposed to be at 9:30, so I won't go into the specifics of the recommendations.
It'll be live.
Yeah, I'm cheating that. But you know, some of these recommendations are actually, we understand and recognize that the Media Council are doing these projects, but it's a way to enforce it. It's a way to support what they're doing and push it further. You know, when you say there's negative and positive, there definitely are positive things. I agree with my friend here about some of the reforms that the KEG are doing, but other groups too. I mean, the Media Council, the Kenyan Union of Journalists has brought in new life that it didn't have in the past, the Kenya Correspondents Association, and we're all actually working together now to try and push several goals ahead. I mean, one goal that's really close to my heart is trying to end impunity against attacks and threats against the press, because this is definitely a problem in Kenya, and it's something that we're seeing almost on a weekly basis. I mean, so if we can, you know, unite as media organizations and as journalists, I think that would be a great achievement, and that was one of the main reasons for writing this report, to kind of accomplish that goal.
Okay.
A number of issues come up. I mean, the media scene is also changing, and the challenges media is facing in Kenya are also changing. They are dynamic in the sense that sometimes the challenges media is facing is not purely government originating. I mean, there are quite a number of challenges that we are facing. At a legal point, if the Media Council Act and the Kenya National and the Kenya Information and Communication Act, the two acts that operationalize Article 34 of the Constitution, already have a problem. They are in the courts. Then you obviously see there's a problem, because these are the mother laws that would have protected. If they're already contentious, then that's a huge thing. But moving away from government-oriented, because not all the challenges, right now we have a big problem, weak institutions, media support groups, because we are seeing a rebirth of Kenya Editors Guild, of KUJ, where were they, you know, weeks and whatever. Because once we have weak media support groups, it also becomes a problem, because media, we are always running to put off fires. I mean, anything that comes, any law, whatever that affects journalists, they always got off hand, because we are not organized as a group that would react to something. The other thing will be now we are moving away. Some of the challenges we are facing are purely like the threats, are not purely like the Kanu days, which were purely government security related. We are also now seeing challenges from organized criminals, gangs, political activists who are harassing and beating up journalists, not necessarily the government. Move to the counties, a huge challenge that now journalists are facing at the county levels, and these are not purely government oriented. So when we are talking about broken promises, it's not surely about what government has not done, but there are things that even what are media owners doing? What is the salary for journalists in this country? There are journalists who have worked for years without a contract. Government has got nothing to do with that. So some of the challenges we are facing are purely industry-led. Media owners, what is the level of our professionalism ourselves as journalists? For example, if I ask the class, what is the quality of training of journalists in our colleges? What has the government to do with that? So some of these challenges, we need to face them as journalists ourselves, not necessarily the government, to deal.
And I think for me, I mean, I love the report, and I'm going to share it with my students. You know, it's a point of us for discussion. But looking at when we talk about broken promise, I think the challenge that I had in reading it is it seems that the focus mainly, and even looking at the recommendations, they actually seem to be more recommendations to government than, you know, the industry, the profession. you know, and I guess it's a bigger problem than just looking at you know, what government hasn't done.
Absolutely.
To what, you know, all of us haven't done, you know. And I think in launching the report, I think this should be a wake-up call to us to ask ourselves, what have we, for example, in training not done? What are the broken promises that we in training have not done, you know, or the promises that we have broken to the profession? You know, the institutions that are supposed to protect journalists, what is it that they haven't done? You know, and I guess this should be so that going forward then we sit down and have, you know, an open discussion, because that's the only way that we're going to protect this. Because I guess from always looking at it as this is what government hasn't done, this is what government hasn't done, I think we need to reflect.
So let's hear what Tom has to say about that. Is it something you agree with, that there's more in terms of putting into this basket people with responsibility that need also to be accountable?
Absolutely, and I completely agree. Maybe I didn't go far enough. You know, we tried actually to give a holistic approach, and I also agree with Victor here that, you know, we shouldn't just point our finger at the government. The challenges and enemies to press freedom are much more diverse now, and I think that's really what Kenya's facing. I mean, during the Moi era, there was a kind of an identifiable challenge to the press, and a certain amount of solidarity within the press corps against that challenge. Now people don't know who the enemy is. It could be even someone in your own newsroom.
That's true.
And this kind of you know, confusion and say mystery is something that I think is silently affecting the press, and I think that's what we were also trying to convey.
Yeah, Eric.
It's true. When we have a confrontational kind of scenario where, you know, it's them versus us, it's never going to move. And you know, it's usually very easy to you know, name those regimes that are oppressing the media. And I think, in all fairness, let's not even look at the Jubilee government or whatever. Let's just look at the structure of the Kenyan government is not set up to oppress the media. There are laws, of course, that need to be amended, but these laws can also be worked on. I think, like Victor has said, the challenges are very many from very many other sectors, and if the profession of journalism in itself strengthened from within, then we can deal with the government very easily. Because it's very easy for the media to actually influence the government and even play the government in some cases. You know, they're politicians. You can also just play politics and outmaneuver them in very many things. For example, when the two laws were being published, the KICA and the Media Council Act, those amendments, by the time they were going through Parliament, we actually had not even started reporting about them. We come to report about them at the very last stage. Is that the government to blame? No, it's our own institutions to blame. It's our own disorganization to blame. When you talk about, like I was just asking, who is the leadership of the Kenya Union of Journalists? You know, it's still, you know...
Yeah, he didn't.
They're all of these organizations.
We have the Correspondents Association.
You have Amweek.
Amweeks. They are very weak. If we actually strengthen these ones, if we have them as strong as the Editors Guild, because now every day, I mean, you see the Editors Guild is meeting the Speaker of the National Assembly, the Editors Guild is actually having a meeting with the President. If we had the Union of Journalists doing the same, and dealing with the universities as well, and the training institutions, and the Correspondents Association, and not just, you know, coming to push that, you know, we are complaining about ABCD, we are complaining about salaries, but also improving the quality of journalists that we have, we are going to be a better organization. And I think maybe the challenge is for the next report. I think it's a good start. You know, this one is a good one. Next report, maybe look at what's actually eating us from inside. Just come and give us a mirror. Just come and tell us, you guys, your problems are here. Forget about the government for now. Your problems, sort them out. If these guys are the problem, I think the Media Council is a very strong institution. It's established by statute. You have a lot of powers, and you can sort out in very
And is Media Council playing that, you know, its rightful role in understanding its mandate in this conversation, so that it's not just one of the main institutions we are seeing in terms of journalism and, you know, representation and all and their rights, but is it actually coming to the front line and pushing for issues on journalists?
I think in all fairness, while I will not judge the institution because I work there,
it's important to self-critique.
But to me, where I sit and coming from, I think we are doing the best within the circumstances. both external challenges and internal challenges, because externally we are dealing with the laws, but internally have journalists accepted to be regulated? You know, yes. So even as journalists ourselves, do we recognize the Media Council ourselves? How many journalists are accredited by the Media Council, for example? How many are willingly coming? So once we have even some
but
internal...
maybe they're not, because they don't see your role in their lives or in their career.
And sometimes Media Council is a self-regulatory body. We are not a trade union.
Yeah.
And when many of the times journalists say, you are not working for us, you are not pushing for our salaries, then we say, that's a KUJ mandate. We are not a trade union. So, and most of the problems journalists seem to be grappling with is issues of welfare and salaries. So if you are not working for their salaries and welfare, then you are not working for them.
Yeah.
But Media Council has 17 mandates, functions, 17, of which welfare of journalists is one of them. So these are the 17. We are working. For example, we have now produced a curriculum that will be used, a national harmonized curriculum for all journalism training colleges in this country. I mean, that's a plus. We are working on safety and security of journalists. We are risking. We are paying lawyers for journalists. We are doing all those things. But seemingly, if you are not working on salaries for journalists, which we are working on, we have just done a study on the payment structure and working conditions of journalists in the country, which we want to engage with editors and media owners to see if we can get. But because the challenge was, if you don't have a harmonized training, how do you discuss for minimum salary? When people have a certificate after 2 weeks, another one has a certificate after 2 years.
All right. You've mentioned safety and protection of journalists. I wanted to wrap up on that. We have 2 minutes to go. From each of you, I want to hear briefly, this has gotten out of control, it appears. You highlight some of the cases that we've seen recently, beating up of journalists, hospital-ridden. What is it that needs to happen to change that, so that there's this sense of contempt, it doesn't continue?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I mean, according to our research, and I think the Media Council has similar figures, it's basically every week or every week and a half a journalist is either threatened or beaten in some capacity in Kenya. That's pretty bad, and it's worse than previous years. I mean, unfortunately, I think this is partly one of the unintended consequences of devolution, because a lot of this is happening at the county level. Journalists are getting threatened, and there's a number of factors that we need to do to improve the situation. I mean, number one, I think we need to do more sensitization at the county level between government, police, and journalists. There needs to be more dialogue on that front. And number two, I mean, people need to really, media houses really need to start funding and supporting their staff outside of Nairobi. Because, what we find out, and it's sort of off the record, is that quite often a lot of these journalists are so poorly paid, they end up working also for the government. And then, of course, they're compromised. And their security is also compromised.
It's also compromised. Last word.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting he raises the issue about, this whole issue of security of journalists also being devolved, that now it's also at the county level, and I guess it just points to the many people who want their interests protected, not just within the central government but also at the county level. I like one of the recommendations that he suggested, that the whole sensitization of what journalists are supposed to do, and sensitizing certain organizations like the police, for example. I think there's been a very bad relationship. I mean, the police, every time they see the cameras, they think, these guys are out to, to fix us. Yeah. So that kind of sensitization on their part, to appreciate the work of journalists, even in their line of work, for example. I think we've seen a lot more of police attacks and police brutality on journalists in the recent past than we have seen before. And traditionally, journalists and the police had a very good working relationship, So I guess that sensitization needs to be done. But also within media houses, what are the structures in place internally to ensure that the journalists are protected? In addition to remunerating them better, what is my guarantee as a journalist who's working in a media house that I have certain protections because of the work that that I'm doing? And I think for me the question I always ask myself is, as a trainer, then what does this mean for me? Do we have courses where we even tell journalists this is how they need to protect themselves when they're covering certain stories? The truth is we don't, and I know we have worked with Media Council before to just come and share with us their experiences and what should be done. So it's something that we need to work on. Yeah.
All right. Finally.
I think the key to a better media operation in Kenya, better media environment in Kenya, lies with the Media Council of Kenya. It's a very good step that we made a couple of years back when we set up the Media Council of Kenya and we entrenched it in law. Now, I think internally we need to accept that we have a Media Council of Kenya, because I think we don't, and Victor has just mentioned, that, he has alluded to that. The media owners need to actually accept that self-regulation is best done by the Media Council of Kenya. If the media owners support the Media Council of Kenya, then they'll sit together and they'll look at those 17 mandates that they're talking about, welfare being among them. They'll see, how do we self-regulate in terms of welfare? How do we ensure that, we have a standard treatment for our staff and journalists across the country? The unions and other associations that work within the media should also recognize the Media Council of Kenya. Then the Media Council of Kenya can help to disseminate that information. Because the way we're saying is, if, like you're saying now, the violence is actually happening at the Mashinani, it's not that those people are actually fighting the media. It's because of the contempt with which they treat those journalists. Because these people, they just look at them as
media.
What were media?
Yeah, what were media?
And then what were media, they come and give them 200 bob. You write a story, or when this guy comes and he's facilitated by the politician to come for the event, he's given transport to go back home by the event, he's fed by the politician. This politician will always treat this person with contempt. And if they continue treating them with contempt, they'll pick them.
And the police will...
Tomorrow, if you don't sing to my tune, I'll slap you. Who are you?
Okay. Well put. I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Victor, you definitely need you a little bit more on our newsroom conversations. So Eric Latte from Capital FM, the online editor there, Nancy Booker, Dr. Nancy Booker, who is the chair of the journalism department at the Multimedia University. Tom Rhodes is the East African representative of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and you'll be at the front line from around 9:30. It's going to be a live event on KTN. You'll catch it there as the report is launched. So a lot more we'll be hearing from you. And as far as this is concerned, then the recommendations, so we don't preempt everything at this early stage. And of course, Victor Bure, who's the Deputy CEO at the Media Council of Kenya. The special edition of the newsroom ends there. We'll take a short break, but you'll stay with KTN. Michael Gitonga is coming up with a lot more.